Hi everybody, this is Bruce with Habowskistudio. Thanks for joining me today. First, I'd like to thank all the new subscribers, and for everybody that's already subscribed, thanks a lot. Here's another video. This continues on with the idea that a subscriber commented that she'd like to see information on how I tackle structures, buildings, that sort of thing in an outdoor environment, how I fit everything in proportion to what I'm painting on. And today we're going to work on that with the picture you see behind me of a little farmhouse with a little L on the side. And so thanks for joining me, and let's get started. Okay, to do this demonstration, what I'm going to be painting on is a 9x12 panel that is just gessoed. And for today's lesson, I will be using a limited palette for demonstration purposes to speed things along. I'll be using titanium white and some ivory black mixed with burnt sienna, half and half. So that pile will be my dark pile, and then I'll have my white. And then I'll just work with value to paint the scene. If you want to see about mixing colors, you can check out other videos that I've done on limited palettes and that sort of thing. But today's lesson is more about how I make sure to fit everything I want to fit when I'm outdoors painting. This lesson is going to be more in an effect if I'm working plein air. Obviously, we're working from a photo today. It's about 15 degrees out, so I can't be outside doing something, but I'll try to talk through my thought process when I'm painting from life. And obviously, when you're outdoors, you're going to have a wider scene to do. And what you should use then, from the grid method video that I did previous to this, you have your little viewfinder. You can also buy the little plastic gray ones in art supply stores that slide to different proportions, but this will work fine. 2 pieces of cardboard. You can kind of see if the camera catches this. If you're looking outdoors, you can kind of look through that and approximate by holding at the same distance from your body while you're picking your composition. It's very important to do that. Don't be going in and out, or else you'll get proportions wrong in your painting on your panel. So you can use that. So today, I'm going to assume I've already done that, and this is the area that I want to paint. Okay, to begin the painting, I'm just going to give this a light wash to kill some of this white. Just thinned out some of the dark color. This is nothing new for oil painters. Just going to give more of a wash, a generic. Just get some Now you can do different things with different subjects, but you could sketch out your idea first and leave the really white areas untoned. So there's different ways you can approach that, and that's kind of its own little lesson potentially. Right now, the lesson today is how am I going to transfer this without using a grid and just using methods I might use when I'm outdoors painting, where I want my subject placed within the confines of my painting support. So right now, I'm just going to get some tone on here and actually use some paper towels to buff it out. That'll set up fairly quick, especially outdoors in the sun. I'm just going to take something on here. There we go. There we go. Just get some tone on there. Okay, now put that up there. Now what I want to do is pretty much how you see the image on the computer screen is how I would have used my little viewfinders in the field to get a generic, and you can hold this out at arm's length and get some points, like if you wanted, okay, I want that there, I want the bottom to end right there, and so on. So we're creating parameters. Your scene would be through here. Let's just pick out a little area. And if I was just painting this, you can see the lines right about here. You got the side of the house here, and so on. So I've already done that here with this cropping. And now I just want to start sketching here. Just thinning out some more dark paint to sketch with, and we're going to go on to the next step of drawing this out. Okay, before we get going here, you want to divide your panel with some light marks. Measure, make sure it's in the center. And what this is going to do, this is going to give us parameters so that it doesn't have to be super perfect. I mean, you could measure it out, but you know, just take a guess where the center is. Take your brush, verify that, do it again, yeah, close enough. And once you do this a lot, you'll get pretty good at it. And look at that, pretty close. Okay. Now, we don't want any straight edge. We don't want to divide this in half. Now, if you look at this, this is kind of the same. So what we're going to do, I really like mostly this area of the painting. So what we're going to do, pretend like this is the scene you see, and we're going to take our little crop things, viewfinders that I showed you in my grid method video. You should check that out. I've found my composition. You can use this to see approximately where you want this. And as you're doing this in the field, you always want to keep your arm at the same length. And you could kind of close one eye, and through that you can determine approximately, like, oh, the one vertical comes approximately 2/3 of the way in, and you could just put in some generic lines until you flesh out some main bones, and then put these down, because I find it very difficult in the field to keep going back and forth. But get your generic main structure points, and then you can go in and flesh it out. So let's pretend like I've already done that. And what I'm going to do is kind of shift this over a bit. This area here, it's going to be a little thinner and so on. So because I know I want that to be my main focal point, I want to, I mean, this may not even end up in the painting. My main focus is this, like I said. So, and I know to achieve that, and this is arbitrary, I want this tree shape back here, but it can change shape a little bit. If you change a shape, be careful about, like if you make the tree go way larger and not having sky holes, it may have a larger shadow on the roof. But I want to maintain them, as much as possible. So again, here's my middle point, and I want to pull over, I want the roof to be right there, and I want it to come past right there. And then we want the bottom to be approximately right here. And just, it's relatively straight. You can measure, see if there's angles, transfer angles. I've done that in some plein air videos, so check out my channel if you haven't already. And you can see other paintings I've done on my Facebook page, Habowskistudio. So this is where I want the roof to come over a little bit, okay? Now we have determined that, I can take, for demonstration purposes, this brush, I'm trying to measure the tables in the way, so I'll use this to represent a brush. Now what I want to do is I have the total height, find that total height, and I want to get the peak of the house. here. So the total height. That peak where this intersects, that's approximately 2/3 of that height of this. So to do that, then we'll take this measurement, we'll approximate 2/3, doesn't have to be exact science. Do this, put the peak right there. Just kind of an imaginary, like I said, this is more the focal point, so I want to have some fun with some reflected light and shadows and all that. So you can see I've pulled this in the viewer's field. This again is simulating a real world picture, and I'm extracting a component of that scene. So I'm not using the whole scene, and that's the whole point of taking part of the scene with your viewfinders, okay? So if you have any questions about that, drop me some comments and we can discuss it. I hope that makes sense. So we can see this little part here, that's the angle of the roof. Now, we also want the main lines to be identified right away. So the thickness of this roof is just a little past half of its height. Okay, see that? There's the thickness of the roof, and it's going to come down to right about there. So if we look at this, we can also do it by going half, and you can see the halfway point's approximately right here, that 2/3 of the way down. 2/3 way down is the end of the roof. So if this is our height, 2/3 way down, approximately right there. Now we can verify by measuring the roof. It's about 2/3 down to the, let's see, probably about a little past half. So we measure a little past half. So it looks good. Now we'll create, don't worry about drawing through shapes. Sometimes you need to do that because then you'll just paint over them or block them out. Now, this here, I don't want this, again, in the center. So you can see, here's the point we made right here. And this is the constant why it's important to do the, pay attention when you're in the beginning phases. You can see that this side of the house, this little add-on, falls a little bit in from the point of roof. So if we do that, it's going to be smack in the middle. So to adjust for that, I'm going to have it a little off, just enough. And it stops right about there. When you know you don't need a line a little bit, you can buff it out so you don't get confused. Now we need to obviously move this over the angle, recalculate the angle of the roof. We can measure, just like you would in real life looking at something, the angle of the roof. And there's the point, and then you just connect the dots, so to speak. Roof angles back just a bit. So that's one of the first things with your composition viewfinders is to find your center of interest. So this is going to be nice, and you can see that the perspective again comes up, make a mark. And something you got to be careful of. You'll correct this once you get all the drawing done. You can correct things to look correct because, of course, I'm working from a photo and the distortion of angles, so I'll be adjusting that as we go along. And imagine if this piece wasn't built on, I'm going to draw through the shape to get the house shape, and that's a little bit in. So this is the house without the L built on, so to speak. Now we can see the L, and this is going to work out nice. It's just a hint above the middle. Wipe out just a little of this. Now we're going to draw this angle. That goes there. This is the pitch there. I'm going to measure that pitch. So now what we can do is how we got the imaginary side of the house here, because if this L wasn't there, we can see that the interior of the eave falls in line with the edge of the house. So right here, and this would be the eave of the house. Now to get this pitch, sometimes it can be confusing. You get your pitch too much like this, and another part of the pitch of the roof's the other way in your perspective, but a house is even there. So to do that, that's when it's going to be real important to get those angles correct, because it'll draw itself even though it goes off the edge of the panel. So I'm going to mimic the angle, holding my arm straight, come over, make a mark, double check again, make sure I didn't turn my hand like this. Doesn't have to be perfect, no, you can tweak it, but if it's within enough of an allowance, there you go. Okay, now what we don't need, we can go ahead and get rid of we got our basic composition now off center. We can wipe out some distracting lines. This will help you in doing the rest of your measurements. Especially make sure you don't leave too much up in your area that will be the sky to have that dry, because they'll eventually bleed through. Okay, this is the basic structure. Now we're going to start detailing within those confines, and we want to look at it and say, yeah, I think that's going to be kind of cool, because this is going to be the light, then we get the dark over here, because remember, this is what my focal point was. Okay. Okay, now, like I said, get rid of our distracting lines here. Doesn't have to be perfect. Here's our, this is actually shadow cast by the house and such. So just put that in arbitrarily. Now, we can see, if you want to use our imaginary where the house was at or not, to see where the shadow ends over here, you can say, okay, the width of the L is this, and the point where the shadow ends is twice. So we go 1, imagine your spot, 2. Okay, now it's not really critical because you got a tree with a random shadow, so that could be anything. And I'm imagining where my doors are going to fall here. And I want a little more over. And this is what I mean about, so you can just, and you also want to check, and then remember our imaginary center line? Not that that's too critical now, but I'm going to shorten it just a smidge. But that's how you would measure if you wanted a accurate. And I am going to keep that, because what we can do is just, you can see just about 2/3 way down is where the shadow starts, comes over about 1 time width of that, there, comes down, and go ahead and just mass in your shadow. You can always pick up some more thinned out dark paint, but I want to start building up some values just to then see how it's going to progress. And we're also going to do that. And I'm just using a little round brush for all this. Obviously for speed, like for the tree here, I can take a bigger brush, compare the two sizes, and get a little more thinned out dark paint to create. And this is, you can do anything with the tree. I want to leave a little sky hole right there. Come over here, cut around that shape. Trees kind of, sometimes you get too much moisture in your thinness of paint. Mix in a little more of your paint into the turp, because now if you think it's too dark, I'll show you what you can do. I'm just doing that. Take your paper towel and just blot out, just lightly buff out. Kind of gives some texture of a tree too. And for the shadow on the roof, which you can kind of make anything that you want. It has to match a little bit. Of course, the tree, you have some variety. So if it was a structure, you'd have to follow certain rules, but because it's a free-form shape, you can get away with it a little bit. But do this, and I'm not too worried about sky holes right now. I'll put those in when I put in the lighter paint, but I'm just doing this. We can finesse that later on. We're just getting some base tones in here. Kind of flatten that out a bit. Redefine a roof line, and there's some shadow under there. Take my, lighten that paint just a bit to create shadow under the eave of the barn roof, the little L. Buff it out. There we go. Coming along. And we have the foundation of the house there. Get in some dark shadows. Go just a touch lower. Obviously, I'm not going to put in the Jeep if it shows that needs to be in there. It's too distracting. There we go. I'm going to mass in some generic tone for the lightness on the house, the shadow side of the house. Don't worry about deeper shadows like under the eaves. We'll do that after this layer sets up. You'll see in a moment. Again, this is just two colors and a little bit of terps. Buff that out. You can always do another layer, like again, if you were outdoors, this would set up quite fast. Because you can see that we'll go ahead and put that in. This is darker than the shadow of the house, so we'll go ahead and darken that up. Of course, that'll be even a little darker once we go with more opaque paint. Go ahead and get some right on the meeting here. A little more paint into the wet terps, so when I buff it out, it doesn't buff out completely, but it's not too thick at the moment. There we go. Okay, start working on the door now. Now comes the doors and that sort of thing in the barn area. And again, we're going to measure. And what we're going to do, I think I'm going to use this thickness of the roof here to judge where this darkness starts here, this line. So if I imagine you're looking at your scene outdoors and you comparing, but this is my outdoors right here, so from this point to where the darkness inside starts is, wow, this is going to work out pretty good, is the height of the roof. So this is blocked in a little bit, you know, I'll put the white little gutter there, so I'm going down just a little bit into the shadow. And we can see, I'm going to double check something here. Hold on. See, this is what I mean. Even people that's been painting for a while. Oh, that's more like halfway. Okay. See if I got that correct. There we go. Okay. So again, this is the height. This goes there. Right about. Now, measuring this point to this point, what have we got? So, we're measuring, okay, this line's a little off. So what you do is you just take a little bit of terps, wipe out, get it wet, wipe, then buff out this line. Made it just a little too far, reiterate the line. And this is what happens. It's a constant back and forth sometimes. So now, reiterate that stopping point of the door. Put that right there. And the height of the door is just a little below the height of this. So we can guesstimate that. And the height of the door compared to the width. So the height of the opening is the width of the opening. So we go like this. And the key here is see how it blows off. We got, which I kind of like actually. It's almost right on this ending point. So we're going to raise this up just a bit. This is when you got to do artistic license, because now you got to divide the doors. Obviously one side's, so if we assume a little bit past the halfway point, so we'll put that right there. And if you're a little bit off, it's not the end of the world. Like I said, this is simulating painting outdoors where your best intentions is just practice, 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 and you know, getting your placement. But this is a pretty accurate method. Just again, using proportions to what you're painting on. And no matter what, maybe you have a subject that won't fit the proportions you're using out in the field. You'll have to find another subject or take a variety of canvas sizes, panel sizes. And usually that's not practical because a lot of plein air artists want to be able to backpack with their stuff. So just got to adapt to the situation. Improvise a little bit while still remaining probably about 90% accurate. How's that? And our darkest dark in there. go. And we got this open door. You want to be careful how wide you make that because it's the same, of course, as the other. It's this door's open, so want to measure that. Falls right about there. Do a little bit. Measure again. And do the top of the door there. And once I start painting with value, you'll start seeing this popping. Then we have this little access door up there. Goes right up in the shadows. And it's almost halfway into there, so about right there. Goes to halfway to the other door and up. Like a miniature hayloft door. Okay, now back to over here. You see the end of the house is here. And where the L is added on, there's a little bump out. And honestly, this is something that I'm not going to put in this little vertical here because it's the scale of my piece. If it was a bigger painting, I could describe it more to make sense, but I don't think it's necessary. This just add on to a house and they could have sided over the whole thing. It's little, because normally you might have the bump out here where they've added on, but having it inside a little bit, you have to make an artistic decision. I think it looks odd, so I'm just going to act like they planked over the whole side there. So you make artistic decisions. And we got the shadow of this whole eave. So we do this. That's the underneath. And when I mix up paint for in here with the values that I'm going to mix up, it's going to start really bringing it to life. So we'll just take out this little bump out and measuring where the basement window starts. It starts this distance, goes in, and it starts right there. Measure again. And the starting point of basement window equals from this point to where the darkness starts in the L. So we have that, we have that. And then looking approximately where it ends, if I was to do a vertical, you can see just a little bit off. We can correct that in the value painting. Again, it's not critical. I'm assuming people are plein air painting and speed is of the essence and they don't have an opportunity to come back. So it's important to learn techniques for speed. And this is kind of nice. I want just a hint. I think it'd be a nice balance of a tree that's not there in the picture, that just a bit. I think that'll be nice. And then we have the house. This window falls just a little bit where this line starts. So this window, and then where this ending point is of the inside of the eave is right there. The edge of the window is going to be right there. So we sketch in the window. Picture the perspective. As perspective goes, it gets more angular because it's going in perspective. Mimic like you're looking in life. That matches. And then we have a little window in the L. It falls, ends right there. And I just want to check my perspective lines, modify them a bit. And we can see this window is in the center of these two windows, so I'll draw a center line. Imaginary. We'll take that out when we're done. That center line follows right where the storm starts. All right, continue on along here. Okay, now that I'll draw in the other two windows. And we can see, I see in the photo that the top of these windows follows just about starting right there. So as this is just guidelines for the windows. And I've done that again by measuring my angles. Continue to do that, especially in the beginning of your painting. You keep doing that, you'll get very good. Of course, these windows all match in terms of width. So once I start where I want to, starts on the end there, reinforce the edges of the windows that are going to be there. Then I'll take out my guidelines, and each window is the same width. So verify. And same height. So draw through shapes. Verifying angles. Now I'll spend just a few moments taking out my guidelines I used right here. Okay, now I'm almost ready to start the opaque painting process. You can't really see any kind of window details in there, but in my reference photo from before, but I'm just going to make these basic windows for sake of the painting and for clarity here. And I got all the components in now, and I study it. The foundation of the house is darker than the shadow, so even though I can modify lightness and darkness when I paint with opaque paint, I'm going to go ahead and just continue with the idea of what I expressed before about getting the values with this thinned out paint. At this point I have everything kind of going, so it's not critical. I know the painting's going to work for me. That's when you stop and reflect on what you've done before you start painting. That you can just go into color right now, but again, for the sake of this painting demo, I'm going to do the painting first in value, and then I can overlay with color later. So, okay, the next section for this is going to be in time lapse to save a little time and upload and all that. But I hope you got the idea about how to block all this out, and the rest of just blocking in the painting I've done in other videos you can check out on my channel. So let's get started with that, and then I'll see you after. Okay, everybody, I want to thank you for joining me for this video. I'm going to leave it right here, let it dry, and then I'll put some color on it. And I hope you learned something about how to work plein air and make your subject fit to your constraints of your painting support. And I want to thank you for watching. Check out my artwork on Facebook, my Habowskistudio page. And again, I want to thank you to all my subscribers and your comments, and let's continue that dialogue so we can all, I can help you learn, and maybe I'll learn something also. We all can learn something from each other. And please share the video and give it a thumbs up. Get it out there amongst people that you think would find it useful. All right, until next time, take care.